everyone, I am so excited to break down the good and the bad of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, one of my most anticipated movies of the year. MCU Phase 4 has been up and down in terms of the seriousness of the content. It's been going on the goofy sides, but I knew Ryan Coogler would bring something a little bit more heavy, especially with the passing of the great Chadwick Boseman. Before I get into what I like, let's start with the premise. Queen Ramonda, Shuri, and Baku, Okoye, and the Dora Milaje fight to protect their nation from the intervening world powers in the wake of King T'Challa's death. As the Wakandans strive to embrace their next chapter, the heroes must band together with Nakia and Everett Ross to forge a new path for their beloved kingdom as the rise of the T'Challa kingdom, led by the Namor, their king, threatens their livelihood. Black Panther Wakanda Forever is rated PG-13 for action, strong sequences of violence, and some language. A lot of people have been saying that Phase 4 feels unfocused. The shows and the movies don't feel connected. Big events happen in one thing, but it's not shown in others. But what I think is going on, it's not connected in a way where things are crossing over, but I think it's connected in a way where certain themes is happening throughout this phase. Things like the trauma, grief, loss, and how these characters are trying to heal themselves with community, spirituality, and acceptance of oneself. Some of those themes are throughout all of these, even the ones like Thor: Love and Thunder that's a little too wacky. You can see those things in that movie, and I think Wakanda Forever being the final movie of this phase is perfect because it encompasses all those themes, because these characters are going through great trauma after their king T'Chaka dies. T'Challa becomes king. Thanos snaps. 5 years pass and so many people are gone. They finally come back and you think they're going to be victorious, and then they lose another king, a family member in T'Challa, and everyone is facing through this in different ways, and we get to see different forms of grieving and how people deal with their traumas and how people have to move forward but also reflect at the same time. And I think that the movie was very introspective in that way. Watched everyone deal with it in different ways, whether they run away from it like Nakia does, or Shuri, who dives herself into her work and just forgets everything about her like family and tradition and things that Wakandans do, or even Queen Ramonda, played by the fantastic Angela Bassett, who is trying to keep the glue together, and she took her own way of accepting what happened to T'Challa. And the way the filmmakers have tackled that makes this one of the most emotional, harrowing MCU movies to date. A lot of it is very heavy, and it's not only a celebration of the character T'Challa, but also obviously Chadwick Boseman, who died in real life, and they decided not to recast him, and the way they honored him and the character at the same time was just done fantastically. I didn't think it was like a cheap cash grab to get people in. I think that you can see through the performances, you can see through the way everyone that was involved in creating this really cared about this person and how they wanted to uplift him. Even the way the Marvel logo started in the beginning of the movie was a tribute to him, and it was just super powerful and moving. Tisha Wright, Angela Bassett, Danai Gurira, Lupita Nyong'o, and more given fantastic performances in this movie. As you can see, their real life grief over the passing of Chadwick Boseman leaps off the page, or I should say the screen, over their character's grief over T'Challa passing. And these performances really uphold the movie a lot and feel so realistic. You know, obviously they're acting, but you can see a lot of these emotions are actually real, and a lot of the things they're saying is how they actually feel about Chadwick. And I think that just heightened everything and just made it a lot more engaging. In terms of that, the two standouts, though, is Angela Bassett, who plays Queen Ramonda. She did a great job in the first movie, but she gets a lot more to do here, and she is a tour de force. She has two monologues in this movie that are very powerful, very moving, maybe even three, that just touch on different ways. You could see that she's the elder statesman in the family, that she's dealt with it. She lost her husband, then loses her son. So she's gone through this already, and she's already grieved, and the way she speaks to Shuri or Nakia or Okoye is just the way she's holding things together. It just was very dope. the way she just so powerful about it. And it makes things like James Cameron, when he says that these MCU movies are just roller coaster rides and these characters are like jocks in high school or in college and they never grow. Like, things like this is showing that he's completely wrong. And then Shuri, who is now more of a focal point in this movie and kind of the main character and the person that we follow the most. Letitia Wright did a fantastic job as this character. I was absolutely blown away by her dealing with her spirituality, accepting tradition, and also her believing her science and kind of holding that up more and running into her work instead of dealing with her grief and lashing out. And that character arc that they set her on was really the through line through the movie, and how everybody around her had to react to how she was acting. I think that she did a fantastic job as the new lead and as the character that we follow, and she elevated herself to main character status in my eyes. Shuri did a great job of being this level-headed but sometimes frustrated character that I really, really enjoyed and really, really was engaged watching, doing everything she did in this movie. And obviously, a lot of the people returning from the old movie did fantastic jobs, but we have two newcomers as well. Panther Wakanda, I think that's how you say his name, plays comic favorite anti-hero, sometimes villain, sometimes regular hero, Namor, or Namor as they said in this movie. And they changed the origins of the character. In the comics they're Atlanteans, but here they made them Mexican American, Aztec, those places that said they went under the sea, and adapted all that culture, and it just kind of brought a little bit of more flavor into this. The way Black Panther gave a little curtain mover of how like some African culture is, and he dives deeper into this in the African culture here, Ryan Coogler, but he also brings Spanish, Latino, Mexican culture in it as well, and some more of the Caribbean. This movie gets very inclusive as they kind of hop to different places as they go on this adventure. And Namor is this powerful, regal, aggressive, conniving, but also very charismatic character that I think reflects a lot of the characteristics from the comics, with the added flavor of him being Aztec and a Latino character. And I think that Panther Wakanda did an amazing job as being one of the best antagonist. I don't know, it's hard to say he's a villain. I guess he's a villain, but he's more of an antagonist in the story that we've had in the MCU, on the level of a Killmonger. And that wonder that we felt in the first movie, seeing Wakanda for the first time, going through the city, seeing how the people live there, we get that with the Telecan Kingdom, which, in the comics they were Atlanteans and it was Atlantis, but now this is something different, something new. And when we first see it and is revealed, it's just a wondrous feeling that you don't really get a lot in the MCU, just getting introduced to a new section of it. And it was just beautiful the way how all the people were, and we've seen all the customs and the history and the origins. All that stuff was really well realized, and I liked it a lot. That change, at first I was scared about the change of changing it from the comics so much, but after seeing this, I really enjoyed the choice Ryan Coogler made. And the second newcomer, Dominique Thorne, who plays Riri Williams, she knocked it out of the park as this character. I think this is a great introduction to the character. She wasn't just thrown in, she was central to the plot, and a lot of her characteristics was very endearing. She's snarky, she's funny, she's a fun character, she's smart, and she she's going to be playing Ironheart. She's going to get a show later, and that's going to be a spin-off and everything. But in the comics, Ironheart has been a character that's kind of not found his footing, but it's a character that's inspired by Tony Stark, becomes a kind of a legacy Iron Man character. And here in the movie, they took that to heart, and she felt a lot like Tony Stark in ways where it didn't feel like copying, but like there was certain things she would do, but like that's like Tony would do something like that. And they played a lot of homages to Iron Man 1 with her character, but just the way she interacted with the Wakandans, and her being from Chicago and looking up to Wakanda and being brought there, and the way she reacted and how she just interacted with everybody and her chemistry. I really enjoyed her interaction, the action that she was in, and her commentary. She brought a lot of in this movie that's heavier and darker than most, she brought a lot of light and fun into it as well. And I gotta give a shout out to the story and the craftsmanship of this movie. This is a geopolitical spy thriller on the side of like something like Winter Soldier. And I've always said that I felt like the Black Panther line and story. Obviously, I wanted it to be done with T'Challa, but obviously he's not in the movie anymore, and they're mixing it and making all the Wakandans kind of take that place as the character in the Black Panther story. It felt like his second movie needed to be elevated, like how Winter Soldier elevated Captain America, and I think they did that here. Unlike Black Widow, which I felt like was a copy of Winter Soldier, this is like it taking inspiration from that to that level of writing and story and filmmaking. And it also reminds me of Eternals in a way where it's very much of a slow burn. It's thoughtful. It lingers on things so that you can feel how the characters feel, and we can get really the real thought out of it. It's not quick. It's not trying to move. It's trying to sit there in the characters' feelings, and that's going to turn some people off. And I've heard some people say that they were bored in certain parts, but that's the type of movies that I like that to watch outside of the MCU. So I really enjoyed seeing that here, especially with a movie that's talking about grief, trauma, the circle of life, and different like heavy topics. I didn't want them to rush straight through them. And another thing that's outside of a movie, which is actually a video game that this movie reminded me of, was Last of Us Part 2, which I think was part of why this movie's going to be a bit divisive, because that game is very divisive. If depending on how you feel about the way they did the storyline here, especially towards the end, it may turn you completely off. Like that game turned off a lot of people. So those are the three like things that this movie reminds me of at that level. I think those three things are great, and I feel like Ryan Coogler mixed all those, but putting like the Black Panther, sauce on it, that flavor they got from the first movie, he brought it over here with a little bit of Marvel humor, and it made a really good concoction. His directing is tight, is fantastic. Action is thrilling. The music, while not as great as the first one, is still really well used here, and I liked it a lot. The costume design is even better than the first one, so it should win an Oscar for it. And all the character work and the directing was top notch. Cinematography was great. The movie looked beautiful. This was just top tier filmmaking. One of the biggest things that this has over the first film is I think that the CGI and the VFX looked way better than the first movie. My big gripe with the first movie was the ending fight, where it looked like a video game, but like an old video game. CGI and VFX it just looked too rubbery. And here it feels more real. Obviously you could kind of tell in certain spots that is VFX, but for the most part they were really well done. Let's talk about the bad. So first things first, I gotta say that Everett Ross, who was in the first Black Panther, is brought back here again, and he has a subplot that ties into the main plot a little bit, but it like continues past that, and I feel like it doesn't fleshed out enough for it to make real impact on the audiences in the movie. I didn't mind it too much, but I left saying, really, that's all? It didn't come back to really affect the third act, and I felt like they should have did a little bit more with him and that plot to make it worthwhile in the movie. And while I said that the VFX and the CGI for the most part was really, really well done, especially compared to a lot of Marvel movies that's come out in the last year and a half, 2 years, there were certain shots or certain things here and there that looked a little wonky, maybe might have been a little rushed, and I'm not sure. But there's like one very noticeable shot where Shuri and another character is standing in the Wakanda cities in the background, and you can tell that it's completely digital, and it kind of took me out of the movie a little bit. So I think that overall the CGI VFX was really well realized, but there's certain shots that took me out a little bit where I was like, oh, that is definitely not real. And yes, the movie is 2 hours and 45 minutes. And for me, when I watched it, I was so engaged, so enthralled. It's obviously those, like I said, those two kind of spots here and there that it pulled me out a little bit, but I got thrown right back in once I got used to it. The pacing for the movie was fine for me, but I just want to say that not for everyone. It's not going to be for everyone because the movie is not full of jokes, full of action. We get taken out of Wakanda a bunch. We get sent to a new realm, and there's a lot of conversations and thoughts and feelings and stuff like that that you may not see in a MCU movie. But it's not going to be for everyone. And I understand that. And I think that's going to be a divisive thing for people where they might think it's a boring aspect. That's not what they paid to see. But it was put in the trailers. The way the trailers were, they made it seem like it was going to be a slower, more contemplative movie. So if you didn't see the trailers, you go into this blind. That's just a kind of a warning. It is a slower burn movie. Get into the verdict. So I think overall, I absolutely love this movie. I think it was a near masterpiece. Obviously, there's some quibbles I have that are more nitpicks that bring it down than, uplift it. But overall, I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best MCU movies we've gotten in Phase 4. I think it's one of the best MCU movies that we've gotten, period. I think it's superior to the first movie. And while the absence of Chadwick Boseman, T'Challa, was felt, but I feel like the touching tribute that they had for him and how every other character stood up and really stepped up to fill that hole together. I don't want to say I didn't miss him, because that's a weird thing to say, but I didn't feel the hole as much as I thought I was going to. I think that Shuri, Queen Ramonda, Nakia, and Okoye especially, all these characters really stepped up to make this movie a very special thing. And I gotta give shout out to Namor and Namor as being a really great anti-hero antagonist for the film, and give Ryan Coogler all the credit in the world for creating this film that's about healing, and not only for the actors, for the characters, and also the audience. So I think that if you're going to go see this movie, go watch it in the movie theaters, have a community experience, and see it on the biggest screen possible. And with that said, I'm going to give it a B+. Did you like it? Did you hate it? What would you rate Black Panther Wakanda Forever? Are you like me and think that is the best MCU Phase 4 movie and it's almost flawless? Or do you think that they should have recast T'Challa and no matter what they did in this movie, it was not going to turn you? Drop all those comments down below. Let me know. Like the video, like my review, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you can be notified of my reviews, reactions, and ranking lists. I'm actually going to be ranking all the MCU Phase 4 films and all the Phase 4 shows. So hit that notification bell so you can be on the lookout for that, and you can catch more of my content right now.